Christians are the number one group of people that are exploited for toxic empathy.
We're very susceptible to this.
Very susceptible.
Because a little bit of truth makes the lie go down. Well, hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Under God podcast. I am once again joined by Pastor Nate, and we're in this series called Woke Mirage, really just learning about his experience really with wokeness and coming to the other side of it. And, you know, we ended the last episode with this prayer of a weary black woman, unbelievable prayer, essentially asking to help them hate white people. And Pastor Nate, in the last episode, you started talking about all of these expectations that started to come on you simply because of your whiteness. We talked in the last episode about that kind of evolution in your story. Maybe tell us a little more about these expectations and kind of how this continued to evolve.
Yeah, thanks, Pastor. It's great to be back again. This was a really bizarre season for me because I really love people. And one of the things I was talking about with someone offline here is that I have friends that I care about that really believe that the world is white and out to get them, that everywhere they go, they're looked at as a suspect, they're treated as a threat. Like, that's really what they believe. And so they carry the weight of that. And you can imagine if you really believe that, like, that becomes a weary
beliefs, whether or not they're
thing.
True, they have devastating consequences in your life.
Devastating consequences. And of course, this is why, in the book of Romans tells us to change the way we think by the word of God, conform ourselves to the word of God and not the patterns of this world. But if you buy into the patterns of this world and you exacerbate every issue into a system of totality, it does begin to weigh you down. And so then when you believe that, then you're looking for people who aren't like you to try to help you to undo what you perceive life to be. And so I guess let me ask you this question first, because we'll start here and then we'll go from there. When you think about what it means to not be a racist, like, what does that mean to you?
Well, I mean, I think it's self-evident, but obviously it's not, because people are trying to change all these terms. I mean, I think classically when you think of racism, you literally think of looking down on or ascribing less value to a person intrinsically only based on immutable characteristics like the color of their skin. So to be racist would literally be to look down on every black person, to essentially be the figment of the imagination of many of these people. It would essentially to be that. I think this is why it's so dangerous when you start thinking and ascribing intentions to people that you don't know, when you start kind of looking for racism under every little interaction and under every little rock in your life. It's like, because racism's a pretty serious thing. I mean, to look down on anyone on any kind of immutable characteristic is literally evil. I mean, the Bible talks a lot about that in the scripture. And we think about the children of Israel, like a Pharaoh arose that knew not Joseph. I mean, they were out in Goshen, in this area. They were turned into slaves. The Israelites were turned into slaves. That was a wicked thing for which Egypt paid a great price for. And so when you think about racism, I mean, that is what you think about. However, it starts to get twisted and muddled, and that's kind of where we find ourselves in your story.
Yeah, and so my whole life, I thought what it meant to not be a racist was to treat everyone the same, as an image bearer of God, irrespective of what they look like, or what their cultural background even is, like just to treat everyone on face value as a human being that deserves dignity and respect and all of that. And if you have a biblical worldview of humanity, of the Imago Dei, that is what we should do. And so I thought, silly me, I thought that's what it meant. But what I found, the deeper I got into these conversations, is that the goalposts move. And the goalposts keep moving. The more these academics sit around in their ivory towers and come up with new, fantastical ideas about what racism is. And so for example, critical race theory would define racism as power plus privilege. So, and they would say racism is different than racist. So you could be racist as a person, or maybe not. But then because it's an ism, that it's power plus privilege, if the people in power and the privilege that goes along with that is conveyed to you because of the color of your skin, then now the system of racism has made you a racist, whether you want to be or not.
See, okay, so that's nonsensical. That's absolutely insane. When you think about racism, you're talking about racist. So what you're saying, though, is now they flipped it on its head. So now, because of these systems of racism, it actually creates racists.
Yeah.
Meaning that they didn't have any decision in that process. It's inherent. It's implicit. I mean, wow.
Yeah.
What a flip.
Yeah, and so I'm now being told, and for a while, it's embarrassing to admit this, but I started to believe this. Well, I guess according to this definition, and then according to these academics' description of our current system in America, I guess all white people are racist. Yeah. And so this is what I'm being told. And part of me, again, is starting to believe this until I began to interrogate it. And so the goalposts are moving. And so now it's like you are inescapable. It's an inescapable reality that your very existence in this country, in this time,
devoid of your decisions, devoid of your autonomy, devoid of the choices you've made, doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter. And according to Ibram X. Kendi, the only thing you can do is to be racist against people like you, so that then we can call you one of the good guys. You're an anti-racist, but still an outsider.
Sounds like you're a tool of an agenda.
You're a tool of an agenda. So this is where things have shifted. And so so this is where I started a little bit to like peel back the curtain a little bit. So then I'm thinking, well, man, if I'm a product of this system that is so racist, and again, this is where you get, when was America founded? Was it 1776 or was it 1619? And you get, the 1619 project comes out and they're rewriting American history.
It was 1692 with Columbus. But anyways, yeah. But
1492.
You start 1492, forgive me, 1492. Well, you start getting into this presentism. So now it's like they're challenging like just understood language. But then what happens is this is where it becomes an ideology that becomes a framework for which you start to redefine history. You start to literally take racism and implant it everywhere you possibly can, and then define even the past by that. And I think that's one of the most dangerous aspects of, we're going to talk more about DEI, we're going to talk more about essentially presentism and essentially recreating history to match our current narrative. But it really, again, creates chaos. Things that were once understood, things that were super clear, you learned lessons, you can grow, you can develop, are not, they're not there anymore.
Yeah, and what I started to feel like was, okay, well, if there is, so let's talk about this for a second. So let's talk about systematic oppression and systemic racism. I would never claim that I have, overturned every single rock there is to turn, so I might be missing one. But I started to think like, well, man, if there is systemic racism all over the place, everywhere, well, surely it'll be easy to find, examples of systemic racism. And as I would go, what I would find is, like, you could find examples of one judge who would disproportionately issue sentences to a black person versus a white person with the same criminal record and the same crime. And they would sentence a black person to go to prison longer than they would sentence a white person. Or maybe a black person would get prison time and a white person would get probation or something like that. But the system itself is designed to correct that. When you find an inequity that's taking place in a judicial system like that, there are already triggers and mechanisms built into the system to come and bring correction to that. Now, sometimes people do have to do the work, but I would say that is a racist person, maybe knowingly or not knowingly. Maybe they're operating with an inherent bias, or maybe it is very malicious and intentional and on purpose, and I'm going to get those people of color and I'm going to make them go to prison longer. It could be that. There are people like that in this world. But when you look, what you find is not a system that does that, but individuals within a system who do those kinds of things. And then the system that's in place is actually designed to eradicate that and correct it when it is found. And so what I began to, and then again, you go look at policing. It's like, well, policing is all racist. I mean, we had the whole defund the police thing, and you had Kamala Harris out there, paying to get people out of jail because, they were put there just because they were black, and we got to, get rid of all the police. I mean, this is why the Democratic Party, by the way, has completely lost any power and control in America right now, because they sold out to nonsensical ideas like we should get rid of police force. But in my context, in these conversations, we're hearing about this all the time, and how racism is baked into policing practices, and there's all these dog whistles, and there's all this, like, we're just creating all this stuff. And every time I would go and dig into it, I'm like, first of all, I would be when I would ask questions like, well, where does this happen? Oh, well, that's your fragility talking. You can't just receive information and take it. You have to
sit down and shut up, tool.
Sit down and shut up. Anytime you ask a question, that's your fragility talking. It's proof of your fragility that you would want to actually just do fact finding and interrogate claims. Which is bizarre to me on the surface. But then when you go look, I believe what you actually find is you find people who at times have done racist things, and you can prove it, but you don't find it in systems. But once you paint the system and you say all of policing and the way that we police people is all racist, and they'll go back to, well, don't you know how the sheriff posses came, and they all developed to round up, slaves that had escaped, and then even during Reconstruction, they just changed the terminology, and this is why police force exists. That's not actually true. That's a piece of what happened. Yeah. There are stories like that, and there are some, groups of law enforcement that did originate that way. But again, through the bloodshed and through the fighting of a lot of white people, by the way, we have corrected those systems so that when those things show up, those people are penalized and punished. But we get told it's the whole system. And so now I'm being told as a white person, and I want to be really clear. This wasn't like my bosses and church leaders. They're not the ones but it's people that I'm just on a journey with, sharing their perspective, and I'm, wrestling with it. And they're telling me, like, well, the whole police system is racist, and if you really want to be on our side, you have to believe that, acknowledge that, and do something about it. And this is where, again, not only do the goalpost of what does it even mean to be a racist or not be a racist move, the goalpost of what does it mean to be a friend to someone begins to move. So there's these different categories of demands where it starts out as, hey, man, be my friend. Like, let's sit around a table, hear my story, let it hit you, respond, don't react, take it in. Believe me, all this, so you do that, and you're showing compassion and even empathy, and you're thinking, man, like, and I'm not doing it to try to get a badge. Like, I don't give a crap about virtue signaling, which is, by the way, what most of the anti-racist activity really is. Yeah. But you really care about people, so you're like, man, that sucks that happened to you. Like, what do we need to do to fix? Then, here's what we need to do. You've got to become an ally with us, which means you have to, first of all, you have to adopt our ideology.
Well, you have to accept the premise. One of the things, this is a pro tip.
Yeah.
Any premise that's not biblical, just reject the premise. Many times we get down the road of wanting to argue a false premise, and we're already on shaky grounds, when what we need to do is, I reject the premise of your question.
Yeah.
I reject that you can simplify me by the color of my skin any more than I can do that with you. Yeah. So I reject that. That principle. I reject the premise. And so, I will say this is tricky. This is how it works. This is why, again, it's so important to make sure you're seeing through a biblical lens. So you're in this place where you're starting with probably sympathy, but then you get closer to these people, you put yourself in their shoes. You want to believe what they experience is true, in as much as they've experienced it. You're starting to walk with them, but you get to this place where it's like there's no mechanism for compassion. There's no mechanism to actually move towards God's way, and they end up moving you towards their way.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah, and it's not just moving towards their way. It's fine to try to see the world through someone else's lens. Cool. I mean, we do that with, take this out of a race conversation. I mean, we deal with this in the church all the time, where people come into the church with even ideas about the church because they grew up in a cult, in a Mormon cult, and so their ideas even about Christianity and God, and is Jesus and Satan, aren't they brothers? And it's like, it's like, I want to hear about that. I want to hear man, what did they teach you? I want to see the world through their lens, but not so that I can take on their worldview, so that I can better help them to a worldview of truth, which, by the way, again, this is so crucial. This is not my worldview. I'm not trying to impose my worldview on anyone, and I don't expect anyone to take on my worldview. I want us to take on God's worldview. Yeah. That's why we have to move away from wherever we come from. I got to move away from my background. You got to move away from yours. All our friends got to move away from theirs. I wish we had a Bible in the middle of the table right now
Yeah.
just to metaphorically demonstrate it. We all got to move that direction. The problem is when ministry and relationship all becomes dominated by this kind of, and you could honestly, Pastor, you could change out race for something else in a different context. I'm just telling you my story. But I think this has permeated our culture, and that's why we're talking about it, because Christians get disoriented because they got big hearts. I mean, Christians are the number one group of people that are exploited for toxic empathy.
We're very susceptible to this.
Very susceptible.
Because a little bit of truth makes the lie go down. It's like a little bit of sugar makes the medicine go down. A little bit of truth can get a lie in us. And this is part of the purposes of the church. It's part of walking together with other believers. This is actually, going back to a previous episode, this is why having a diversity of experiences and opinions and essentially life experiences helps, because somebody may be watching you go through something and see you're dealing with it in a not biblical way, and they can share their experience about what they did during this, or maybe what they did that was good or bad, and help you move. And so I think it's just again so important we go back to our purpose as believers is to be conformed to the image of Christ.
Yeah.
And what you see with these ideologies, particularly this one, instead of that being the goal and the object, what happens is it's a gateway into that ideology actually conforming you to itself.
Yeah. And it is another religion, and we've kind of covered that. But let me summarize this first for the listener, because I know the minutia, all this can get a little deep. There's sort of this process that I personally went through, where it was like, you got to be a good friend. Like, just be a good friend in the church. Listen to the story. Then you got to be an ally, take on the worldview. Then you have to be an advocate. You got to use your mouthpiece, and you got to use your power to advocate what we say needs to be advocated for. And then even when and this is really for me where the wheels came off the bus, when it was I was being an advocate, and I was, I think, a pretty good one at a time. And then I began to get asked to be an accomplice. And that's where things started to really shift. So I'm just laying those out, and we'll kind of talk through them a little bit.
Yeah, let's do that. Yeah.
So we talked about the friend piece a lot. Then there's the ally piece, which again is like, take on my worldview, make it your own. And then when I tap you and go, hey, this is a problem, you just react. And you think about militarily, that's the way allies are. I mean, if we have a real ally and we're attacked, then our ally comes to our defense. That's what they do. But they're not actively out there advocating for everything that matters to us. They're ready and waiting. If something bad happens, they step in and come alongside you. And I think that's fine, provided that something that happens is actually real, you know? Yeah. And I would still say, like, I would be an ally to anybody experiencing racism right now today, you know, no problem. I would joyfully jump in and ferociously jump in if racism was taking place and someone was being impacted by that, to be an ally and to come alongside them and fight that. But that wasn't enough. Then it's, well, don't wait for us to bring the problem to you. We've made all of these things known to you. We've
go find them.
It. Now you go find them and advocate against them. And so I did. And in 2016, there was an incident that occurred where someone was receiving an award, a black actor was receiving an award, and he went on TV and he started talking about basically his experience of being raised, and he gave some shout out to black moms, which, you know, there's a subculture there of amazing women who have to take on a lot. That's a whole nother story about how so many black women end up as single moms, and it's tragic. And many of them are some of the strongest people I've ever met, you know. I love black mamas, you know, and he's talking about them, and then he starts talking about past historical things, like redlining, you know, and where, you know, he started talking about the misappropriation of the GI Bill and how, you know, funds were given to white soldiers coming out of World War II that weren't given to black soldiers, and white people were allowed to get home loans in certain neighborhoods and black people couldn't get home loans in those neighborhoods. And he's talking about these things, and I noticed when he did it, a lot of my white friends and this is like, I don't know why anybody watches the Grammys or the Emmys or whatever.
Not anymore,
else.
but they used to.
Doesn't matter, but used to. But a lot of people saw this, and then they're like, man, this guy's making everything about race, and he's lying. And I saw that, and I thought, well, actually, the stuff he said was true. Now, it's not true today, but when I saw it, I thought, well, it's true. Redlining was a thing, like it did actually happen, you know, and the GI Bill was misappropriated. And so I saw this as an opportunity to be an advocate, and not opportunity as in I'm going to be opportunistic and go beat my chest, but I saw, like, I don't need somebody else to tell me that what my white friends online are saying is wrong and that what he said is right. And I can go out. And so I created a social media post about this in support of what this guy had said. And I was like, actually, all you guys saying he's making this stuff, this is actually true. Here's the receipts, this is where this happened. This is when this happened. And I'm going to stand with this person I don't even know, but he happens to be, turns out, half black, white and black parents. And I'm going to stand with him. And when I posted that, for whatever reason, it went viral. Like within 2 days, I had 50,000 shares of this post.
Wow.
And I'm getting emails to come on to radio shows to talk about it. And all of a sudden it's like, whoa, I was trying to be, an advocate, but I didn't know it was going to go to this level, And so now I'm sort of thrust into this place where everybody's, like, man, that was amazing. And thank you for doing that. And I realized that I had, done something meaningful. I didn't even mean to. Like, I'm just like social media, like, I'm going to put something out there to talk about this and combat people. And I realized what I did was so meaningful for people that I thought, well, maybe I should do this more. And so I for a season really saw myself as an advocate for my friends in the black community. And I began, but what happened was this was an incident that occurred. He said things that were true. People said it was not true. It was pretty clear. To, no pun intended, very black and white,
Yeah.
But then I found myself feeling the pressure of, you got to advocate more. You got to advocate more. Like, that one's not enough. And man, you got to be our voice. I'm getting people from all over the country, people of color, like, finally a white pastor will say something like this,
Wow.
And so then it was like, whoa, like, yes, I do want to be your friend. And
I wasn't making a statement about every pastor
ally
in America.
Yeah, I'm not speaking for every pastor in America. And so then I sort of found myself in this current where the expectations, were growing on me to continue to advocate. And I'm not a victim in this. Like, I was a participant in this. And again, like I said, a heart of love, loving people is what led me into this. Loving the truth is what led me out of it. But I'm doing it because I love people. I'm like, let's be this. But then it's like, okay, behind closed doors with some of my friends and some other people around me, acquaintances that are kind of in this circle as this is happening, they're like, okay, it's not good enough for you to make social media posts, and it's not good enough for you to talk about this, even in conferences and I went and spoke on these topics at some different events. They're like, you've got to become an accomplice if you really want to be a friend to us. You've got to be an accomplice. And I didn't even know what that meant. I'm like, what do you mean be an accomplice? Like, when I think of accomplice, I'm thinking of like
a crime.
A crime.
Somebody who
like, you want to
commits
go
a crime.
You want to go kill somebody? I'll drive the car.
Let's go knock over the liquor store together.
That's the accomplice. I'm like, what do you mean? And they're like, well, we have got to bring down these power structures of whiteness, and you've got to be the one to do it, and you've got to do the work. And I even had people in my church suggest that in order for me to prove that I wasn't racist, which again, now we got the definition of anti-racist in mind.
Wow.
To prove to be a racist, I had several people come and tell me, Pastor Nate, if you really want to be an accomplice, right now we have too many white leaders in our church. You should actually tap and anoint a person of color and tell the people who run the church that they should take your place and you should step down from your position of power, because you being a white person in power in this church is creating we already have a lead pastor that's a white person, and we got another person in power that's a white person.
Wow.
And there's not enough equity and there's not enough representation in the very power structure, which this is crazy. Jesus is the one who appoints church leaders. But we had gotten to a point where church leaders, there was no conversation about who did God call and anoint and appoint and all of that, but you should replace yourself. This would make you a real anti-racist. And this, I'm like, I don't even understand. Like, I don't have a framework even for where you are now. But these were the demands that were being placed on me. And this accomplished language, it kind of romanticizes extreme actions. And this is one of the places where I started. Again, you talked about tension, but then I'm like, man, like I thought I was a good friend, you know, and I thought I was an ally. And I even advocated, you know, for stuff that mattered to you that it cost me something, you know, in a way. And it cost me relationships with other people who thought I was, you know, trumpeting, you know, the plight of Black Americans too much. And I was making too big of a deal out of stuff. And, you know, if we'd been friends there, you probably would have told me, man, shut up. You're talking about this too much, you know. But I was trying to be an advocate for my friends that I loved. And then now I'm being told there's this other level. And this is where I started to really understand that the concept of critical race theory, and I began to do more research and begin to, like, where is this coming from? Was what was really happening was there was a new religion that was emerging, and in my case, from inside the church. And I don't mean inside the church I was in, but inside the church. Like, this is happening. We both have friends, you know, that where this is creeping in, and it's like the new sin, the sin that separates you from everything is your racism that you were born with. And again, the only way to salvation is to become an accomplice and to divest yourself from the system vocally, proverbially, in reality, to call for white people to give up positions of power, resign from your job.
Call for Christians to become communists. I mean, when I hear you say this, you take, but that's really what we're talking about.
You're the historian.
We're talking about race Marxism is what we're talking about.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, you have Karl Marx, you know, it's like the proletariat, the bourgeoisie, you know, but with this, you have the white and the black. And it's this class war that, by the way, has never worked and always destroys. Again, when you take a look at following Christ, you take a look at what it means to be a Christian, what Christian unity looks like. It's not this crazy maniacal focus on how we're different. It's how in Christ He's made us all the same. We were once complete foreigners and strangers, but now we've been brought in to the very family of God. And again, I think it's important as I'm hearing your story. This is why we've got to be careful about what we allow in, about the premises that we accept, and really just about knowing God's word and having some alarm bells in our lives to be able to check it. Now, I will say from 16 all the way through to, you know, the first several years of the 2020s, this was at the forefront. And I am so thankful that as I look back on this and even hear your story, that it's going to be heard by people who they have questions. There's some dissonance right now, maybe at the very beginning, hearing your story, they're going, oh my gosh, I think that's what I'm feeling. Yeah. And because of your experience, they're going to be able to adjust and to, you know, equalize back towards what it means to be a Christian. It's really good.
Well, and part of thinking about this correctly, and again, that's why we're doing this. You know, we're doing an anatomy of something that affected me and affected the church and is affecting churches all around us. I mean, the church planting movement that we both planted our churches with have taken this on as a primary, you know, and that we won't go into all of that, but that is a thing. And I think as we move forward, this is why identity, true biblical identity, has become such a major theme in what I want to preach and teach and disciple people in. Your identity is, first of all, we're all sinners. And like, you're in your black skin, your red skin, your white skin, we're all sinners separated from God. And our truest identity is to find ourselves in Christ and becoming more of who God called us to be. And when we start taking on other identities as more primary, it becomes a significant problem. In our next episode, we're going to get into the concept of Black Lives Matter, because there was a statement made and there was a movement made, and it was all connected to identity. And this was another significant part of my journey that I think probably still some people are a little confused. Like, is it true Black Lives Matter? Yes, it is true. But there was a movement, and that movement infiltrated the church in a really negative and nasty way. We'll talk about that in our next episode.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's also something that's recently in the headlines as well. And so we're going to be talking about all of that in the next episode. Thank you, Pastor Nate. I'll see you again in a minute.
Let's do it. Thank you so much for joining us today on the Under God podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to like and leave us a review. Your support helps us reach more people with our content. You can stay connected with us on Truth Social, Facebook, Instagram, and Getter. And don't forget to subscribe on Rumble, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and Spotify so you never miss an episode. You can also access show notes and other resources on our website at undergodpodcast.com. See you next time, and remember to think biblically about the things that matter most.